Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of In Defense of. And today I have a new guest to the channel, very special guest, Mr. Liam Hare,
Hello.
fellow Australian. You're in Victoria, aren't you?
Yes, also part of Rush fans as well.
Yes,
So
well,
a part of
there
that
you go.
community who's been working with you through all the Rush albums. So
Oh, wonderful.
the only Australian that I'm on record, the only Australian in the admin community team that is representing the Southern Hemisphere.
Well, there you go.
So doing
And
the hard yards.
yeah, and today we're going to be talking about the third Men at Work album, the third and final Men at Work album, Two Hearts. And I'll just do a little show and tell here. I actually have autographed copy signed by Colin Hay and Greg Ham.
Wow.
I bought this about 13, 14 years ago on eBay when records were, selling for next to nothing, and managed to pick that up for, I probably paid about $20 for it or something like that.
Yeah.
Probably get 10 times that amount for it now, but I wouldn't part with it.
Mine was $12 at a now no longer functioning antique store in North Geelong.
Oh, there you go.
So still the
Yeah,
same piss price as it was probably back eons ago, back when you got your autographed version.
yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the album and sort of discuss it track by track. And again, for those who might be new to this series on my channel, we're not arguing that this is the best Men at Work album, not by any stretch. What we are saying, though, is that a lot of people think that this album is unlovable, has no redeeming features whatsoever. And that's what we're going to sort of try and debunk here, is to say that this album actually does have some really good music on it, even though it might be different from the earlier Men at Work. Did you have any like opening thoughts you wanted to say about this album, Liam?
Um, for me, this was actually the first or second album I got from them out of that trio. So the first one I got was a sealed copy of Cargo in Byron Bay in 2019. Then it was this one that came out that I got at the North Geelong store before it shut down in 2020. And then in Colac in 2021 was when I picked up the black and white copy of Business as Usual.
Right. So, I mean, we'll go through the album, and it starts off with, I think, one of the best songs on the album, which is Men with Two Hearts. What are your thoughts on this song?
It's a great opener and it kind of reflects where they were going at the time, obviously. More simplistic, down to the point than compared to maybe Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive and Who Can It Be Now from the previous two albums that opened them. So more of a simplistic and straightforward approach from Men at Work at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this song. It's got one of those sort of melodies that I think that Colin Hay is really famous for. He's got a real way with melody, I think. Um, if this had had a different production, a drier production like those first two albums, and if it had been sped up just a little bit, I think it would have fit on Business as Usual or Cargo quite well.
Yeah,
Um, it doesn't sound out of place if you sort of think of it in those um, terms, but it's just that it's got that very 1985 production on it. And, one thing that I will say about this album, um, that I think will be a recurring theme of this album is I really do miss Jerry Spicer on the drums, because he was a great drummer.
yeah.
And a lot of the drums on here are programmed. Some of them are live drums, but it just doesn't sort of gel the same way as I think it does
Yeah.
with Jerry there. But I think it's a great opening song.
No, I definitely agree to that. And yeah, definitely missing the key elements as well. John's also gone too, John Reese on bass,
Yeah,
so those bass lines are no longer there.
yeah. I mean, the Ron actually plays bass on this song, so but they get a couple of session guys in to play bass on most of the tracks on this album. So then we get Giving Up.
They're giving up, sir. I think for this album, personally, Greg Ham's songs, unfortunately, for some of them, are the weaker ones on the album. So as we get further into them, I'll explain why, but I would say probably my second favorite. The last track on the album is my favorite of the Greg Ham ones, but this is definitely second favorite. Give it up.
Yeah. Look, I would agree with you that the Greg Ham songs aren't quite as strong as the Colin Hay songs. Um, but I think this one's all right. This sounds very, very 1985. That's not a diss, it's just an observation. I happen to love a lot of music from 1985 that has that sort of sound to it. Men at Work couldn't be expected to, sound the same forever. They couldn't just keep cranking out albums that sounded exactly like Business as Usual or Cargo. The music landscape was shifting. They needed to shift with it. It's not the strongest song on the album, but it's better than I remembered it, actually. I was listening to this album a couple of times again today, sort of preparing for this show, and it's a better song than I remember it.
I'd say the same. I had the record on when I was listening to it again this afternoon while I was doing a bit of work, and I was like, yeah, this actually song is really nice, and it's definitely mid 80s and was a signal of things that were happening around the time in the music industry as well. A lot more predominance on synth and programmatic drums, as we
Yeah.
mentioned earlier.
So then we get the lead single, Everything I Need. What are your thoughts on that one? Oh, you've got the
I
actual single.
love this one, and I believe some of the music videos actually filmed around here in Geelong at the refinery when they're driving in the tour bus.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, so the gas refinery over at Viva Refinery in North Shore, I think like a few seconds of it where it's Graham driving the bus, it's the famous flame, the gas flame area that they have near North Shore Station, Corio Station. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's very nice, but yes, I absolutely adore this single, and I probably would say hands down is the strongest song on the album by far.
Yeah. You know, a lot of my comments on the song Man with Two Hearts apply to this one as well. I think this definitely has that Men at Work sound to it. It's just got that 1980. This one, not so much. I mean, this does have a drier production than some of the other tracks. It doesn't have that, a lot of these tracks were mixed by Bob Clearmountain, and he's known for that, really sort of walloping sound on a
Yes,
lot of his records.
yes.
This doesn't really have that so much. It's a drier sound, even though he did actually mix this one. Um, I remember when this came out as a single in 1985, and I really, really liked it. And, I had good hopes for the rest of the album and, how it would do. I still love this song. I think it holds up really well with, the best Men at Work songs.
Mm.
You put this on a Men at Work best of, it does not sound out of place at all.
Yeah, and I think it shows as well. Colin Hayes still doing it with his own version of Men at Work currently. One of the only few Two Hearts era songs that's making the list. So
Yeah. Um, I did notice though, when I first saw the film clip for this, I would have probably seen it on Countdown. Um, Noticing that only Colin and Greg were in the clip, and I thought,
yeah,
oh, something's
hang
up
on.
there.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't until later that I heard about all the sort of troubles that the band had been through in
Mm.
the creation of this album and that sort of thing. But I think this probably is the strongest track on the album. It was the obvious lead single. Didn't do wonderfully well, but didn't do terribly either. So,
Yeah.
you know, times were changing, and but I still think it's a song that holds up really, really well.
Yeah. I was even looking through some of the radio station logs here in Geelong when I was doing internship, and we looked up Men at Work, like, oh, Everything I Need is on there. And then I asked one of the guys who was working at the station, do you remember the song? He's like, yeah, of course I remember the song. We'll have to play it sometime. So obviously it's still remembered, even though it's from an era where it's not, the band's not fondly remembered. So it's like you said, it's a great point and a good strong single.
Yeah. So the next song we get is Sail to You.
Well,
This is the only song on the album that's written by Colin, Greg, and Ron, like all together, the three of them.
yes. I wrote this song. I also love this song as well. So that's actually B-side on the single. So a good pairing, if you will.
Yeah. I, listening back to this today, I felt like this has a real sort of funky Talking Heads feel to it.
Yeah, it does.
Um, they're exploring new sounds, which is a good thing. Bands need to keep fresh. I mean, you're, very familiar with the Rush catalog, and as I am, becoming as I do my Bicycle Legs Discovers Rush series, they were a band that were not frightened to change their sound as things went along. And
Yeah,
I
and then
think I
yeah,
think
and
any
then
band that wants to have longevity, obviously Men at Work didn't have great longevity, but any band that wants to have any sort of longevity has to keep things fresh.
yeah, I think it comes down to that bass line as well that drives through the song, where that Talking Heads element peeks through.
Yeah. Um, it's a product of its time, but I really like this song too. Um, except maybe the rap bits in the middle. They're a little bit cheesy. I don't know if Colin Hay can quite pull that off.
Yeah.
But the rest of the song really cooks. It's got a great sort of funky beat to it, and I really like it. It's not what Men at Work fans would have been expecting at the time, but I think it works. I like it.
Yep, and probably would say one of the harder singles to come by. Only was ever a promo single, and I just found it at Dixon's Recycled over uh East Melbourne way. So
Oh,
quite a
okay.
rarity to come by. It was B-sided with Children on Parade.
Oh, there you go. Speaking of which, um,
Yes,
the next song, which is closest outside one, Children on Parade. What are your thoughts on this one?
a very melancholic song that I looked it up somewhere, at least I think in my opinion, is in dedication to those who were lost in the attacks of Hiroshima in 1945. Those whose shoes and toys were left when everything cleared over.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it's about. Yeah, but the one thing I really sort of thought with this song while I was listening to it again, and it goes for the whole album, is that Colin Hay is in fine, fine voice on this album. His singing is just stellar on this album. Um, you know, even on a track like this, which it's not one of my favorites on the album. Musically, I don't think it leaves as much of an impression as some of the other tracks do. Lyrically, absolutely it does. It really cuts straight to the heart. But you know, there's some distinctive sort of men at work guitars and bass and sax, sorry, sort of poking through the synth parts. You can hear little hints of what was going on those first two albums on this. You can hear bits of Ron's playing and bits of Greg's playing that sort of harken back to those first two albums.
Yeah, it's another standout song for me personally as well, alongside Everything I Need. Probably would say my second favorite off the album.
Yeah. So then we get on to side two of the album, and it starts off with Maria, which was, I can't remember whether it was second or third single. I think it was second single. Yeah.
Second.
Um, so yeah, what are your thoughts on this one?
I love this one because it's one of the only few times where you get a guest star on there, and it's Renee. Forgetting how you pronounce her last name.
Gaia,
Gaia,
Renee
yes.
Gaia.
I like this one. Very nice sounding song, and a definite good choice for a second single.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're talking about sort of heart-wrenching lyrics, like you were with Children on Parade. I mean, this song is about an immigrant girl coming out to a foreign country. I assume Australia because, Men at Work are an Australian band, but it could work of, emigrating to the US or that sort of thing as well. You know, to start a new life, but leaving her family behind, leaving her country behind. It's a very tender lyric, but it's also a really heart-wrenching lyric. It's a really good story. I think this is a really strong song. It was, again, obvious choice for a single. Um, Sank without a trace, unfortunately. Didn't chart anywhere as far as I know. Um, Yeah, and as you say, Renee Gayer absolutely shines as the female vocalist on this. This song should have been a hit, and it
Yes,
wasn't, unfortunately.
downright yes. Surprised Colin hasn't brought that back yet because it'd be a nice duet with between him and his wife. In the current years of Men at Work would be awesome.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting thing. I haven't seen his current lineup, so I don't really know much about their uh set lists and that sort of thing. So, but I'm
Food for
assuming it.
thought.
Yeah, I'm assuming it relies very heavily on those first two albums.
Yeah, it kind of does, and then it leads into the final two, the final one. Sorry, just a
Yeah.
bit, but not as much.
So then we get Stay at Home.
Oh boy. If this doesn't remind you of 2020 to 2023, I don't know what does. Just from the title alone.
Yeah,
So I would consider this one probably Greg's weakest on this one,
yeah,
just because it's the synth again, it's the production of the time, very, very mid 80s. But obviously, as you know, you like that type of stuff. So, but like I said, not my favorite from Greg in the entirety of the Man at Work catalog, but it obviously is there for a reason.
yeah. I mean, this definitely, as you say, has some of that old Men at Work feel to it, albeit with that 1985 production. Again, strip it back, speed it up a bit, and it would sound like old Men at Work. It would sound like those sort of songs um that Greg wrote for the band, like, Helpless Automaton and that sort of thing. It's got that sort of scarish skank to it that a
Yes.
lot of those earlier Men at Work songs had. Um, Unlike you, this is actually my favorite of his songs on the album. I really like this one.
Yeah, it's a great one. And yeah, definitely that funk skunk scars with the that synth line popping out
Yeah.
through. Definitely can see where you're coming from with that.
So then we get Hard Luck Story, which was the third single off the album.
And went nowhere, like
Yeah.
Mario. Although I have a good feeling this is what came of Don't Preach to Me from very, very early in the career, 81, 82. This was the finalized version of Don't Preach to Me. Just because some of the lyrical content talking about like religious and all that, and that was very much the same in that rare track from the early 80s.
Yeah.
When Man at Work was still the five piece.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know personally why they chose this as the third single because I think musically it's kind of lackluster. Um, it's not as good a song as, say, A Man with Two Hearts. I think that would have been a great single. This
Yeah.
not so much. Um, the lyric again, you talk about, it's like, don't ask me to, for a savior and don't ask me to be a savior and things like that. I like that, but musically, I find it a little bit plodding. Um, the song is 3 minutes and 43 seconds, but it feels longer. It feels like a
Mm,
5 minute plus song to me because there's not a lot of variety in it in that backing track, and it definitely has that wallop, which I don't know that it that suits Men at Work sound all that much, but there were better options, even in 1985, for programmed drums than what they used on this album.
yeah.
Things like the Linn drum and that sort of thing. Um, but I suppose they went with what they wanted to go with. But this is one of my less favorite songs on the album.
Yeah, I actually kind of do like this song. It may be boring, it may be plain, but it's got that synthetic clarinet type of sound that kind of harkens back again of early Men at Work. I rather do like that, which is quite an interesting one for one of the most lackluster songs. And it'd be good to know also that Man with Two Hearts was exclusively released as a single in New Zealand.
Oh, I did not know that.
Check
Um,
Discogs.
okay, I will. Actually, I think that sort of clarinet sound that you're thinking of is actually Greg on his soprano saxophone.
Ah,
So, and yeah, his playing is nice on it. It's probably one of the highlights of the song. Um, but yeah, to me, when you've got a song like Man with Two Hearts, I would not be releasing Hard Luck Story as a single. I don't think I think they had better options on this album.
Yeah,
But
they did.
um so then we get Snakes and Ladders.
Well, this one was certainly interesting. Liking the idea lyrically, I love the idea of this song as well. How there's always where there's an up, there's a down. You know, that
Hmm.
whole snakes and ladders concept. And that synth sound that comes through is a nice little interplay as well. And yeah, it obviously doesn't help that it's programmable drums, but I do like the overall sound of this one. And one of my favorites from that Colin wrote on this album as well.
Yeah. Well, this is Greg wrote this one, but Colin sang it.
Ah,
Yeah. Um, this one, as you sort of pointed out, this one I think suffers more than any of the other songs as far as the programmed drums go. They really sound quite fake and yeah, not great. And that's a pity because I think this is a good song.
mm,
Um, you know, um, again, some nice soprano sax from Greg um on this one. And yeah, I think it's one of the better ones that Greg, and I think it helped that Colin sang. I like Greg's voice, as we'll get into when we talk about the last song. But I mean, Colin, he has such a great voice. Um, so I think it's an underrated song on the album. I really do. And I think
yeah.
if they could re-record it with some live drums, it would really make the song a whole lot better.
If they, I know that Jethro Tull were kind of in the plans, at least Ian's in the plans with the next box set for Jethro Tull Under Wraps. He may be given budget to go get Donny Parry from the Under Wraps tour and re-record his drums for Under Wraps. So it could be a case where if they ever decide to reissue or re-record the album, I would like to see a live drummer, even if
Yeah.
it's from the current Men at Work lineup.
Well, King Crimson did that too with Construction of Light. Um, they actually had to re-record the drums for that one because the drum part was missing when they were doing the surround sound mixes and what have you. And like the drums on that were obviously played, they weren't programmed on Construction of Light, but Pat Mastelotto was playing a very much electronic kit at the time. And yeah, they re-recorded it with acoustic drums instead, or predominantly acoustic drums, and I think it helped that album too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it could be the same case again if they ever convince Jerry to come back and do it.
yeah.
That would be correct.
I wonder who's gonna mix that Jethro Tull album because I've heard that Stephen Wilson says he's done with Jethro Tull remixes. So
Yeah, be interesting to see who else they can pull out that would be willing to do it, considering
yeah,
it's a mixed bag of an album.
I've actually done in defense of Under
Yeah.
Wraps. I'll leave a link to that in the description for anybody who wants to have a look at it. I think that album is, definitely underrated, and
Mm,
it is the programmed drums
holds it
drag that
back.
album down. But long story short, on that video, I think the songwriting is really good, and I think it's some of Ian Anderson's best singing. In fact,
Oh,
on that tour, that's when he basically shredded his voice, because he was singing in a higher range than he was used to for those songs. Um, and his voice has never really recovered from that. But
yeah.
yes, so there we get the last song on the album, which is Still Life. What are your thoughts on this one?
I did mention that this were that one of the more early ones giving up was the second favorite. This one is my favorite that Greg Ham wrote and sung
Yeah,
from this era. I mean, it's like not the strongest ones that he's done, like Help Us Autonomy. That is probably my favorite of everything he's done for Men at Work, but probably my favorite from the album that he sung. A very more melancholic and more slower song. And
yeah,
no, not much drumming. It's just more keys in this one. So, yeah.
yeah. That's kind of what I was going to say about the song too. It's a really moody song to end things on. Um, I think Greg's voice was like he was an underrated vocalist, as I say. He was not quite as brilliant a vocalist as Colin Hay, but it's a bit of a pity to me that we never got any Greg Ham solo albums or anything like that. I would love to have seen what he would have come up with. But again, this song sounds very 1985, but I think that it works in this song's advantage. That kind of moodiness and that sort of thing. I think the sort of 1985 production and the sort of, early digital keyboards and things like that actually really help with this. Um, apart from one studio track on their Brazil live album, this is the last we would hear of Men at Work as far as new material goes. Um, so it's kind of an enigmatic way to go out.
Still life.
Yeah. So yeah. So do you have any final thoughts on the album at all, Liam?
Uh, the cover is certainly probably the least favorite of mine from this. I
Mm,
mean, it's lot less to be desired. I mean, compared to what they had previously with Cargo, which is probably my favorite of their covers. An absolutely amazing cover, might I add.
yes.
But overall, it's a very typical 19 mid-80s release, but it certainly has those strong points, but also has the weak points, but not to be disregarded as well. But it's a good send-off for one of Australia's iconic acts who didn't live more than over 4 albums.
Yeah.
Really just a good trio of albums.
Yeah, absolutely. This album, as I say, it really gets ignored. And that's a pity because, sure, it's not quite as strong as those first two Men at Work albums, but there's some really good material on this album. That cover that you're talking about, that actually got brought up on a Contrarians episode very recently where they were talking about albums that break the fourth wall.
Oh yeah.
Um, and you open it up and you get the other side of the
Yeah, the
that
Gatefold.
but yeah. Um, and I think that's where I heard that Grant Arthur, our colleague over on the Contrarians, really doesn't like this album. So, if nothing else, Grant, if you're watching, give this album another try because there's some really good music on here.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, that's so thank you so much, Liam, for doing this with me.
yes.
Really appreciate it. Can you please let all my viewers know where they can find you, this work that you do online and that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. If you want to check out my podcasts and interviews, we've got some great people who've come through and certainly will come through in the future. Over on my channel, Liam Hare, and you can go 94.7thepulse.com every Wednesday and every Friday. Wednesdays at 6 p.m., Fridays at 4 p.m. through 6 p.m. to hear me live on radio out of Geelong CBD.
Of course, for my viewers, that is Australian Eastern Standard Time. So, make whatever changes you need for your time zone there. I will leave links to all of that in the description for my viewers so that they can check Liam out. Um, thank you so much for doing the program. Really appreciate it.
Hopefully, the next time I see you, maybe we'll be doing some Ultravox.
That'd be wonderful. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to look at some of my other In Defense Of shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to look at some of my studio albums ranked or bicyclelegs Discovered Rush programs, I've got playlists for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the description. Please come and give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.